Okay, welcome officially to today's webinar on rate setting and cost of care. In the next hour or so, we'll explore how to find the just right rate for your childcare business, one that's going to hopefully ensure your sustainability while also remaining accessible to the families in the communities that you care for. My name is Erica Knowles, and I will be your presenter today. I am with the team from Civitas Strategies. We do childcare business coaching and webinars throughout the country to, again, childcare businesses, families, family childcare, and centers all throughout the country. And we are excited to be here today. Quick disclaimer before we get started. The information contained here has been prepared by Civitas Strategies and is not intended to constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. The Civitas Strategies team has used reasonable efforts in collecting, preparing, and providing this information, but does not guarantee its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or currency. The publication and distribution of this information is not intended to create, and receipt does not constitute an attorney-client or any other advisory relationship. Reproduction of this information is expressly prohibited. Only non-commercial uses of this work are permitted. Before I get started, I do want to let everyone know that we will have time for a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to either hold on to them, or if you don't think you'll be able to hold on to them, go ahead and throw them in the chat and we can talk about them at the end, okay? In today's webinar, we will address why pricing is crucial to your business's success. We're going to explore the difference between cost of care and pricing and what those mean. And more importantly, we're going to walk through 5 practical steps to help you find that just right rate that's not too high, but also not too low. By the end of our time together today, you should have some concrete tools and actionable steps that you'll be able to use to evaluate and set the rates that you deserve and that you need confidently for your childcare business. Setting rates is one of the most challenging parts, most challenging decisions for your childcare business as a business manager or owner. Pricing has direct impact on your childcare business's longevity. When rates are too high, you risk parents leaving, or when rates are too low, you risk not being able to cover your costs and then ultimately going out of business. So let's first acknowledge that there are key differences between family childcare centers and family childcare businesses and centers in terms of cost structure and operations, although both share common principles in rate setting, which include things like ensuring affordability for those in your community while maintaining financial sustainability for you as the provider. Recognizing the similarities and the differences helps create effective pricing strategies for both settings, no matter if you're an FCC or a center. Today will help you find that balance and hopefully ease some of the stress around the topic. This is a very stressful topic for a lot of childcare businesses, and we totally get that. So today we're going to hopefully ease some of that stress and fear and anxiety around raising rates or setting the rates. Before we dive into specific numbers, let's make sure that we're all kind of speaking the same language when it comes to costs and pricing, cost of care and pricing. Understanding these fundamental concepts will help you to be more confident in the decision that you make when you set your rates. So, when determining rates, childcare providers must consider both cost of care and pricing to ensure that your business remains financially stable while providing quality care. So, cost of care is the actual cost, what it actually costs you to provide care. So these include all necessary costs such as food and supplies, staff wages if you have staff, rent, utilities, insurance, administrative fees, taxes, all of those things. For a family child care provider, you may have lower facility costs since you operate out of your home, but you may experience higher household expenses like electricity and water and home maintenance. And then a child care center typically has higher costs for leasing or a mortgage for the building, or employing multiple staff. And maintaining commercial grade equipment if you have that. Most centers are required to have that. Pricing, on the other hand, is a strategic rate setting way to ensure your sustainability. So you're going to take that cost of care and you're also going to add more to it, which hopefully will be a profit for you. You should be making a profit, even if you're a family childcare provider or a small center or a large center. When you are thinking about cost of care and pricing, you should be adding in a profit margin as well. Without proper pricing strategies, you run the risk of undercharging and operating at a loss, and then ultimately going out of business, which can definitely affect your ability to maintain high quality care that is required of not just your state, but also the families and the children that you care for. And also, if you're not adding in that profit or you're not setting those prices properly, that's going to increase your burnout and your job satisfaction rate as well. So remember those things whenever you are thinking about pricing and cost of care. If a program does not adjust your rates when the inflation goes up and down in the country, the increasing rates of food and electricity and supplies, this obviously is going to cause a struggle for you in order to maintain that quality of care that I just said. By balancing expenses and pricing, both family child care providers and centers can develop a sustainable, competitive rate structure that ensures long-term success of your business. And that is the ultimate goal. So now that we understand the difference between cost of care and pricing, we're going to actually talk about breaking down your costs. Many providers are surprised to discover, and really, I always say kind of take the blinders off to what actually your costs are and what you really are paying for. So understanding, and again, taking those blinders off, you need to understand your full cost picture so that you are able to set sustainable rates. So direct costs. Direct costs are what most people think of when they hear the word costs. It's, again, what most people think of. So those are things that are directly tied to providing care for the children in your care. So think about these as the must-haves that you have to have for every single day to keep your doors open. Again, if you are a center, staff wages is a big one for you. So staff wages and benefits. This is typically your biggest expense if you're a center. Labor costs usually account for 60 to 70% of a child care program's direct costs. This includes not just base salaries, not just the hourly rate that you are paying your staff, but also those often forgotten expenses like taxes and substitute coverages and benefits. All of those things add to that staff wage and benefits expense. Large centers obviously employ multiple staff members, including teachers and assistants and substitutes, just to meet their, staff to child ratios. While homes, home-based providers may operate alone, but they still may need substitute coverage to cover sick days or, time off that you also should take every once in a while too. Your program essentials are next. So these are the tangible things that you need every single day, like food, whether that be snacks or meals. This is a huge component for childcare businesses. If you're serving breakfast, lunch, and snacks, that cost can be anywhere from $3 to $5 per child, depending on your location and if you participate in the food program or not. So also think of things like cleaning supplies, and what you use to cook the food, all of those things, as well as your educational supplies as well. Centers purchase these items usually in bulk, which sometimes helps to cut down on the costs, while home providers manage these costs usually individually and on a smaller scale, and they have to usually adjust their purchasing based on the number of children enrolled, which obviously can fluctuate. So finally, you have your classroom specific items. So these are age appropriate materials and equipment that make your program go. You should budget for replacement of these items every couple of years. We all know that these things in your classrooms need to be replaced every couple of years. It just isn't about toys and getting the new, toys off the shelf. This is about safety as well. So making sure that they're not broken or, a pinch hazard or all of those things that they become after a couple years. Centers invest in structured classroom furniture, learning stations, and sometimes technology-based learning tools, while family child care providers replace materials sometimes more frequently due to mixed age groups, as well as sometimes not buying that commercial grade where a lot of times the centers have to. So take a moment and really think about your own program. And are you accounting for all of the direct costs in your current pricing structure? Many providers, again, are very surprised to realize that they have overlooked quite a few of these essential expenses whenever they're calculating their costs. Now let's talk about indirect costs. So these are expenses that keep your business running, but you can't really see them. They might not be as obvious when you're thinking about the actual tangible things that go into the cost of care. So these are often the costs that providers forget to factor into their rates, but they are absolutely crucial and they still can take up a lot. They still can be a lot of money. For centers, your facility expenses are probably your second largest after your staffing. Facility related costs typically make up 20 to 25% of your program's total budget, and would include not just your rent or your mortgage, but also those utilities that keep going up, regular maintenance that needs to happen on, say, your AC unit or your playground equipment or your fencing, and also property taxes as well. So a child care center may pay rent for a commercial space, along with additional cost for utilities, maintenance and property taxes, while a family child care provider operates out of their home. But again, their electricity, their water, their heating bills are all higher due to their extended operating hours. So they may also allocate a portion of their mortgage or sometimes even their expenses by using their time space percentage, which is very helpful. Business operations is the next category. This category often makes providers' eyes kind of glaze over, but it's again is critical to remember your liability insurance, your workers' compensation. These are non-negotiables, and you really need to be thinking about that whenever you are trying to list out all of your expenses. Marketing costs is another one. If you are trying to grow your program, you should have a little bit of a marketing budget, and that should be something that is included when you are trying to think of all of your costs. Centers may purchase a child care management system to help with, enrollment and scheduling and streamlining their operations. And maybe the home-based providers, use social media or word of mouth referrals, but you might still need, a small budget for advertising or something for marketing. Professional development is another big one that is often forgotten. It is an investment in your program for you to get professional development, as well as your staff if you have them. So make sure you're not overlooking that professional development piece. Centers could pay for staff training days, continuing education credits, maybe their staff's, CDA, while home-based providers could attend conferences and workshops, or maybe themselves get a CDA. And sometimes at their own expense. So you want to make sure that you're remembering those things. And then administrative overhead is the last big piece that's overlooked. These are the kind of behind the scenes costs. A lot of times it's your time, which again, your time is money. So thinking about those costs, like, if you have a bookkeeper or if you do the bookkeeping, if you have a legal service that you use, licensing fees, of those extra fees that again are forgotten whenever you're trying to figure out all of your costs. So remembering that these indirect costs are just as important as your direct cost when it comes to setting sustainable rates for your childcare business. They might not be visible to parents, but they are essential to remember, and they're essential for providing quality care and also running a professional business that you are doing. So you need to remember that pricing decisions directly impact your childcare business's longevity. Programs that are very specific and systematic with their pricing strategies are more likely to remain operational for years to come. While we all entered this field, probably because we love the children and the families, we must remember that you are a business. You are running a business, and you should be not just covering the costs, but also making sure that you are, have a profit of some kind in order to make sure that you are being a sustainable business for the future. So we've looked at what goes into your costs. Now let's talk about and kind of connect this to your local market. Successful rate setting requires understanding your costs as well as what your market can actually handle. So the next section, we're going to help you gather and analyze some crucial market information for setting these rates. So childcare businesses must regularly analyze and pay attention to what is going on around them in their local demographics. You should be looking at your local demographics. You should be doing a competitor analysis, the economic trends. Is there a new housing development going in down the street? Or, did the mall that's right around the corner completely go out of business? All of these things can have an impact on your childcare. Identifying your service area, typically within, 5-mile radius or so, for a suburban or an urban area, and then maybe for 15-mile radius if you're in a rural area. That is the first step in understanding your market. A center in a growing suburban neighborhood may experience increased demand due to, the influx of new housing development, new young families moving in the area. That could justify increasing your rates and your tuition rates. A family childcare provider in a rural area may need to offer flexible hours or mixed age groups to accommodate varying schedules of the families that are moving in. Competitor analysis is very important. It is about understanding what is around you. What are the people down the street doing? What are they offering? Do they offer a second language, or do they offer ballet or soccer, or all of those different things can really draw families to them. So you need to know what your competitors are doing. A center competing with multiple providers could provide or could focus on specialized offerings like, again, a second language or Montessori based learning to attract families. And a family home provider that's in a saturated area, you could potentially promote smaller group sizes and individualized attention that the children in your care are getting. Quality differentiators are, again, very important. Offering unique, high quality programs can justify premium pricing. Again, it's not about taking money or raising the rates so high that the families can't afford it. But if you are offering different things, you need to include that in your pricing structure. So having that differentiator is very important. A center with a state recognized accreditation could potentially charge higher tuition rates due to its proven quality, or a family childcare provider with a nature-based curriculum or a bilingual instruction or a music program can market these as premium features to differentiate from other home-based settings. By consistently evaluating the factors, childcare providers can adjust their pricing strategies to remain competitive while, again, ensuring financial sustainability. So now that we understand the cost and the market context, let's walk through some systematic approach to setting rates. So following a structured process to setting rates leads to a more sustainable pricing decision. And we're going to break this down into 5 manageable steps for you. So the process involves, again, 5 steps to finding your just right rate. The first thing, we're going to go through these step by step, but the first step is to determine how much your costs are currently. We talked about that a little bit, or a lot really. Scan the market and look at what other rates are in your area. Assess how much care is costing you versus what the going rate is. Step 4 is to set your rates confidently. And then step 5 is to refine your rates on a continual basis and check it at least yearly to make sure that you are keeping up with the market. Things change fast. So step 1, gather your data. You want to start by gathering some data. And again, we talked about some of this, but you want to think about gathering at least 6 months of your costs. We went through all of those forgotten costs. But so you want to, again, make sure that you're thinking about gathering 6 months of your costs. This is going to help you to see what you are spending on a regular basis. For larger, more complex, organizations, this may be as simple as, pulling from books or pulling from your whatever childcare management system that you use. For smaller centers or for family childcare providers, it may be as simple as going through your checkbook or going through, your bank account. Again, very important that you think about a time frame of about 6 months. As you collect your costs, we want you to break them up into two different kinds. What we talked about, those direct costs and those indirect costs. Um, Making sure that you're not forgetting any of those things that we talked about earlier. Once the costs are collected, we want you to organize them. Having a per child cost is very important. Making sure that you understand what the per child cost is. If you charge different, different tuition rates for different age groups, there should be a different per child cost per age group. So again, you should know that number, what it is costing you per child. For, again, a more complex organization or a large center, you want to make sure that you're breaking down those costs per age group or classroom or however your tuition is set up. You'll use this information in combination with the data collected in our next step, which is also the local market prices to help you determine your rates. So as we know, the top driver for parents are the quality of the facility and the location. It is not always about money. Money is important. They do have to be able to afford your tuition rates, but they are really the two most important things are the quality of the facility and the location. So local market prices can vary drastically depending on many different factors, which is why it's very, very critical for you to review those local market prices rather than just Googling what it is nationally. For example, if there are a lot of choices in your given area within 5-mile radius, it can, again, vary very differently. You want to make sure that you're also trying to compare apples to apples, meaning if you're a family child care provider, try to look for other family child care providers to, compare to, or if you are a large center, try to compare to other large centers. If you get information on centers and you're a family child care provider, that's great. But just remember that, again, they can vary greatly. As a starting point, you can check the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services website. They will also have that information on there. But again, it's really important that you're looking at your local area. Step 3 is to assess your rate. So we've talked about how much it costs for you to care for the children. You have a sense of what parents are paying for care in your local area. Now we've come to where you have to come up with the number for what to charge. And to do this, you need to determine your profit margin. So sometimes, especially in childcare, business owners get a little uncomfortable talking about profit as they feel like you're trying to steal someone's money if you talk about the fact that you are in childcare and you want to make a profit. Profit is critical, as it is not only what helps you compensate you for the long hours and the stress and the waking up in the middle of the night worrying about your childcare business, but profit is also what contributes to the long-term viability of your business. So generating a profit is what allows you to set aside funds for repairs or for staff raises, or if you're a family child care business owner, for you to take a vacation. Again, profit is important to the long-term success of your business, for your employees, for the children in your care, and the families that you serve. While you will need to play with the numbers to compensate for local market rates, as a starting point, you can create a profit margin by simply setting a percentage. So take, for example, 15% or maybe even 20% of your profit margin. So if you have a 15 or 20% margin How much does that translate to your total rate? Essentially, what you want to do is to take your current costs that you have, add that profit margin of 15 to 20%, and then that is going to be the rate that you need to charge. So cost plus profit equals your rate. I know that sounds a little easier than what it is, but step 4 is to set your rates. So now that you've created a few different rates, kind of you could play around with some different profit margins. You have the data on what the others are charging in the area. You have the data on how much it's costing you to care for the children. You're bringing all of that data together and you are setting your rate confidently. You can also compare your potential rates directly to kind of, market rates around. It's so much better. I know it may seem like it takes a long time to gather all of these steps, but it's so much better to do this than to some of the owners that I have worked with said, well, I just call around and I just set myself $5 to $10 lower than the average, having no clue if they're actually even covering their costs. So if you find that the market rate is far below what you are currently charging, you may need to consider adjusting your rates so that you're able to increase the amount of children that you have. So if everybody else around you is charging less than you, and you can't get more children and you need more children, you may need to consider what is going on. So maybe your expenses are just too high, and that's where you're going to need to cut back on some expenses somehow, some way. So it's not always that you're going to increase your rates. You really need to collect the data and analyze that data to figure out what your rates should be. So again, if it is a price increase, it is not about trying to take from your families, but it is rather about ensuring that your business will remain in business into the future, so that you can continue to offer care to your community. And then step 5 is to reevaluate your rates at least annually. We suggest that you do it at least once a year. The current market is insane, right? So with market fluctuations, due to everything that's going on in the world, you may wish to reevaluate more regularly in this near term, but listen to what your families are saying. Feedback from your parents or from your families about your rate are very important. If you find, again, that a rate change is warranted, you may want to first kind of think about testing those new prices. Some childcare businesses will, set rates for new incoming families. So if you're doing a rate increase, you set the higher rate for the new families. And then as a child transitions or does whatever, then that's when that family would get that increased rate. There are many ways to think about it and to do it. You just need to make sure that you are doing in a equitable way for your families. So in other words, you could also do something like incrementally. So, if you're going to be increasing your rates by, say, you realize that your rates are way too low and maybe you need to increase them by 15%. You probably don't want to do that all at once. You might want to increase by, 5% every couple months in order to get those families used to those rates. Be sure to update your rates. Be sure to give your families plenty of advanced notice. I'm talking like 3 months notice. You would be shocked at how many times we have coached people who have, and I was a director. I know, I remember having these, conversations with families thinking they're going to freak out. And so many times the families were like, man, I was wondering when you were going to raise your rates, or I heard everybody else already raised theirs. And we hear that all the time as well. So while it is scary, you need to, again, collect this data, analyze the data, set your rates, and be confident in what you are setting for those rates. So now that we've determined, how to set your rates, let's talk about how to implement them effectively. So obviously, you want to make sure that you're trying to minimize that family disruption or any sort of headache for you as much as possible. So implementing your new rates in your childcare business needs to be a plan. It needs to be a plan of action that you're thinking about before you just put it out there to your families. So, oops, 1 second. Clear communication and adequate notice are crucial when it comes to changing rates. Your timeline should include at least, we would say, 90 days for significant changes. I would go so far as to say 90 days for pretty much any change. Again, giving yourself time, giving the families advance notice, putting it out in many different ways, putting it out written, verbal. The families, the parents who are probably going to have something to say about a rate increase. Head them off before it even happens. Meet them in the hallway or again, try to talk to them before they get upset or before they think that you're, raising the rates for no reason. I would always, as a director, also let my staff know when I was raising rates. Because most of the time, even though I thought I was, very approachable as a director and families could always come into my office, they didn't stop by my office to complain about the rates. When they were picking up their child, they said something to the teacher. So me giving my staff the courtesy of talking to them prior to those rate increases also was very helpful. Obviously, they could always refer them back to me, but again, it was just, again, we were all on the same page as a staff. So having written and verbal communication, clear expectations of the changes. When are these occurring? How are they occurring? Are they incremental? Are they all at once? And having that support for your families. I would make sure that I knew kind of where that money was going. Not necessarily, I didn't have to tell every parent that, I was doing whatever with with the rate increase money, but maybe I would know that I was planning to give my staff a raise, or I was planning to fix the fence that, was already broken out back. So that if a parent came to me and had a complaint or had a question, I would be able to say, look, these are just some of the things that I'm planning to do with this money. Again, you do not have to tell your families your whole financial background. However, making sure that they're aware that costs have gone up, food costs have gone up. I need to make sure that we're still able to purchase the food for the children or the toys or the supplies. Again, giving either your staff or yourself the thought, the wherewithal before that conversation happens with a family is very helpful. Again, most families are not going to have anything to say. The one other thing I will say that's actually not even in this slide deck is something that it took me probably 15 years of being a director before I realized. I put in my family handbook that rates were assessed every year, and on average, a 3 to 5% increase would be assessed on their tuition each year. Now, if I was able to not raise tuition rates, great. But if I did raise tuition and have to raise tuition every year, it was there. It was in the family handbook. I went over it with my families before they enrolled. They knew before they enrolled that every year they could expect a 3 to 5% increase. Again, it just gave me that, communication line with those families to be open and honest with them. And it made it so much easier. Again, it took me probably 15 years to realize that, but made it so much easier when that time of year came around. So let's quickly go through what all we went through today. So we talked about understanding the difference between cost of care and pricing. We talked about determining that just right rate and went through many of the forgotten costs that providers often don't think about and take into account when they're setting their rates. And then we also went through 5 easy steps to set and reevaluate your rates. So thank you for being here today. We are at the end, and I would like to open it up for questions. You can either come off mute if you have a question, or you can put it in the chat.
Thanks, Erica. This is helpful. I apologize for not having my video on. For some reason, it's not working on my computer, but I just want to reiterate the last thing you said about, letting parents know ahead of time that your rates will increase each year. We started doing that 2 years ago, and it's just written in our handbook. So when people enroll, they know that these are our current rates, but they'll typically increase 3 to 5% each year. And that has made the world of difference.
Yes.
It's really, people just know to expect that. And then when you send out, a tuition increase letter, it's not really a surprise, and, they're really not upset about it. So I appreciate you pointing that out and stressing in that. And I just wanted to say that's made a world of difference with our programs as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Again, it took me probably 15 years of being a director to figure that out, but it made a huge difference. And again, if you live in an area that's, more expensive, or I don't know, you don't have to always say 3 to 5%. Maybe you just say that, that they're assessed, the rates are assessed, and a, tuition increase, likely will happen each year or something like that. You don't have to, tie yourself to that specific amount, but it was, like Michelle said, very helpful. I was very upfront and honest. As soon as they enrolled, it was right there. We went through it so that they knew, they signed up, signed to enroll, that it was coming, each year. So thanks, Michelle. Anybody else? Oh, thank you, Margaret. Somebody asked about the recording for the first or for the webinar, and a recording of today's webinar will be shared via YouTube within a week or so of this presentation. So, okay, well, we are finished. I do want to share with you that if you have additional questions that you did not want to bring up or come off mute or put in the chat, you can always go to the Tom Copeland blog. We actually, Civitas Strategies, we have taken over Tom Copeland blog since he retired. So if you put those questions in there, someone from our team will be able to help you. But there are 1,500 helpful resources on that site that that will also be very helpful to you. But again, if you cannot find the answer to your question there, you can click on, thank you, Margaret, for putting it in the chat, the Ask the Experts. And then we also want to give you the QR code for our YouTube channel. I do have this slide in Spanish next, but If you have not found our YouTube channel, it has so much information, and you can search different topics for all different types of webinars and things that we have done on these different business topics. They are available in English and in Spanish. So I would highly recommend, if you have not gone to the Civitas Strategies YouTube channel, that you do that, because there's so much information on there. And other than that, thank you all so much for attending. I will stay on here for the next couple minutes in case anybody else has any other questions. But if you do not have any further questions, you're free to go. Lisa.
Erica too.
Yeah.
So I will also put these resources on our While They Were Sleeping spreadsheet. So providers, you can go in there and also find these resources as well.
Thank you. Thank you.